figuring out how we're going to apply these technologies in a safe manner and how we're going to do it effectively and consistently.
Wow. So super impressive, by the way, that you were able to join the FBI at the age of 21. Fun fact, I actually interviewed with the FBI when I was in law school, and they were like, well, you kind of need 4 years experience. So I joined the JAG Corps, and then, I spent 25 years there and never looked back. But that's amazing. So I think we may have some images here of, here we go. So, Tom, tell us about this picture. I think it kind of harkens back to your earlier career.
Yeah, so that's a picture of the Public Safety Bomb Technician Memorial at the FBI Hazardous Devices School, which is at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. It's an amazing school. All public safety bomb technicians in the United States go to that school. And so it's great in that the tactics, techniques, policies, procedures, the way that the bomb technicians, the state and local bomb technicians conduct their mission in the United States is done consistently and safely across multiple jurisdictions, and that helps with improving the safety of it's a dangerous mission, and so having those consistent tactics, techniques, and procedures is really important for that particular law enforcement specialty, so to speak. Which I think eventually counter UAS may be its own kind of unique law enforcement type specialty that's going to require a lot of specialized training and knowledge.
Well, I imagine that background informed also your counter UAS experience because, bad guys are going to do sometimes some of the same things. They're just going to use different tools to do them. And, certainly in Russia and Ukraine, we've seen drones being used to drop bombs. We're seeing drones used to find mines and bombs that have been dropped. So, there's a lot of connections here. But Casey, I think we also have a picture of you from a recent event. I think this is a drone responders event.
That's correct. And clearly I like to talk with my hands, which is something I'll probably be doing today. I don't know what to do with them sometimes. Yeah, that was the Drone Responders Conference in Williamsburg that we went to a couple weeks ago, and representing CUAS Hub and kind of pushing that education message that we tried to do with CUAS Hub, because one of the sectors that we're looking at is public safety and helping them understand how counter UAS applies to them, airspace awareness and protection. And it's I'm coming up on a year after leaving the Bureau, and I mean, doing things like that really make it worthwhile for the jump that I made.
Yeah, so awesome. You just used this term, airspace awareness and protection. And I know I've been talking to both of you now for a little bit. I know that this is a term you're trying to coin, if you will, as being the real issue versus quote unquote counter UAS. It's about airspace awareness and protection. So tell us what you mean by that. And I think we have a really cool picture from a former mission you may have done back in the day.
Yeah, so airspace awareness and protection, that as you have conversations with a lot of different people, sometimes the term counter UAS might have some negative connotations. And if everybody that I've worked with in this kind of portion of this industry, we're all very pro drone. I think we all understand the importance that drones are going to be in our future, national airspace, or how it's going to, enhance our lives with public safety and, inspections beyond visual line of sight flights, drones, the first responder, those types of things. And so trying to get away from that and that airspace and awareness and protection is kind of like a framework that we could potentially use that would go into the use of legally and logical authorized technologies, tactics, techniques, and procedures to provide that overall, that third dimension of security that we need. The days of the gates, guns, and guards they're really long gone at this point, and we need to start incorporating that dimension into our traditional physical security programs that really should be a part of our critical infrastructure, our corporate security, law enforcement, stadium security, all those types of entities should really start to think about their integrating logical technologies, legal technologies, and upgrading their policies and procedures to account for that. And sometimes it can include, everybody thinks of the traditional RF detection types of equipment, which could be cameras, radars, RF detection, and acoustic type systems. But it can also include things like the uncrewed traffic management system, the UTM that's coming up, as well as knowledge of where crewed aircraft are in the airspace, Casey and I spent a lot of time conducting or assisting in investigations where, sometimes crewed aircraft or even celestial bodies or low Earth orbit aircraft were being, misidentified as drones because you have those blinking lights in the sky. So it's kind of having a real overall awareness of what's going on in the airspace.
No, that makes an abundant amount of sense. And I know both of you together created this counter UAS hub, obviously way too long. And I couldn't imagine what the bumper sticker would look like to be the Airspace Awareness and Protection Hub. So we went with counter UAS hub. Tell us a little bit about this. This is your thought leadership platform. You guys are super active on Twitter, on LinkedIn, using CUAS hub. You've grown a huge audience in such a short period of time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, so CUAS Hub is kind of a solution to the gap that we saw. And Tom and I, through our federal work, there was no guidance as to how to do this mission, where to learn more. And we spent a lot of time looking for those resources. So we decided to bring those resources together into CUAS Hub. And we really want to bring the community to those resources. And that's why we are so active in trying to get that message out there, because there's a lot of great work going on all over the world related to counter UAS, airspace awareness, protection, but some of it is becoming stovepiped within those different industries or those entities. So we want to try and bring all that together. And so we have articles and news, we have documents like white papers, case studies, laws and legislation, so you can understand how that applies to your mission. And we also have the vendors, products, services, events, and jobs, all related to counter UAS, because all of those help you accomplish the mission and learn more about it. CUAS Hub, and we're also presenting all of this in a kind of neutral and fair perspective, because we want that education and that learning to be one of the primary focus areas.
Well, your point is very well taken, Casey, that we need to avoid stovepipes. I see some of these events, right? And they're like, oh, it's this counter UAS event, which is great. But then, I go to like commercial UAV and there's no counter UAS presence at all. And, I know I'm preaching to the choir when I speak to both of you, because we're talking about airspace awareness and protection, without which the actual drone industry cannot survive and thrive. To me, counter UAS technology is part of that community and ecosystem. And I agree with you, Tom, when you said, counter UAS has in a way, it can have a negative connotation for people. Some people think, oh, that's counter drone industry, but it's not. It's an enabler, and not for drones, of course. We're in multi-domain ops month because, as you said, there's this third dimension now that whether you're air, land, or sea needs to be protected. Those assets that you have, the people that you have. So I know. So who is the audience that you're targeting specifically with Counter UAS Hub? It's broader than just the companies creating Counter UAS.
That's correct. Yeah, we're really pushing to get academia involved because there's a lot of great research going on. We want to bring public safety entities, critical infrastructure owners and operators, your corporate security, defense. There's a lot that can be learned from everybody in the community. So we're really targeting as many stakeholders in the counter UAS and drone awareness community as possible, including drone operators. That is one of our targets as well, because it is important for drone operators to understand where they fit into that puzzle, because they can also be part of counter UAS operations, but they also need to understand how their operations could affect your airspace awareness and protection and what they're doing.
Absolutely. I'm going to go to Tom here in a second, but before I do, I'm going to throw this out there to folks. And by the way, everybody, this is live. I know you're out there, so make sure you're dropping your comments, your questions. Tell us where you're from. Give us some positive encouragement. We love all that. But I wanted to say that, Saturday, April 29th is FAA's Drone Safety Day. And my challenge to the counter UAS community, air quotes, you need to be out there talking on FAA Drone Safety Day, because what you do contributes to that. So please, 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 I hope this challenge will be met, and I'm going to see some counter UAS companies putting out their own messages to the public and to the, within and outside of the drone community. But Tom, over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I think Casey's point, he mentioned the target audience, talking about the drone users. I think as this becomes more of a law enforcement specialty, like whether it's bomb tech or tactical operations or, hazmat, those types of things, I think when it comes time for these public safety agencies to start building their counter drone programs, counter UAS programs, airspace awareness and protection programs, whatever they want to call it, I think they're going to automatically pivot to their drone teams that are already starting to build and do a lot of great work, because having knowledge of, and I use the term, for those that are around me quite a bit, I use the term drone nerd all the time, and I mean it very affectionately. The more you know about drones, the better logical decisions you can make during a counter UAS operation, the more you understand how the technology does or does not impact when you're detecting drones, mitigating drones. And so the more you know about drones, the better perspectives you can have when you're starting to develop your program.
Well, and I don't think either of you mentioned this in your 30-second elevator speech bio pitches, but you're Part 107 certified drone pilot as well.
Yes.
Yeah, both of you are. Okay, so am I. Join the club. So no, I agree. I did the same thing. I mean, I sought that certification to understand the industry better, and I'll tell you, it was an incredible experience for me. I have a tremendous appreciation right now after studying and passing that exam. Airspace and airspace awareness. So I would encourage everybody out there, even if you're a rec pilot, take the test, even if you never use it one day for commercial ops, to learn, because the trust test is great and it was congressionally mandated, but frankly it doesn't really give you the full picture like the Part 107 study guides and the test does. Casey, you had a question or comment?
I believe that was Tom.
Oh, okay. I'm seeing all kinds of hands raised in the background here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to mention one more thing, Don. Your comment sparked something, is that even in this mission, there are uses for drones in a counter UAS mission, whether it's testing equipment, validating equipment after you've set it up. Some drones are used as tools, whether it might be a hunter capture drone, or it could be used to do some surveillance or ISR, used as an ISR platform to see, like if you're at a large mass gathering where the crowds are, it might impact the types of techniques you use to mitigate drones if you have those types of authorities. So it's a tool that can be used in counter UAS. And so I think if you know how to fly those types of things, then you can be more of a Swiss Army knife for your team. No,
I agree. And kind of getting back to this thought leadership platform you both have created, can you walk us a little bit through, I mean, you alluded to it, but a little bit through some of the features here?
Yeah, so like I said, we have articles and news, so relevant counter UAS news from around the industry, as well as UAS news, because advancements in UAS also affect the counter UAS mission. So like toroidal propellers that make them quieter, makes them harder to hear. So it makes it harder to detect them in, for acoustic sensors specifically. Different abilities with battery life or new protocols coming out, as well as great info from the counter UAS industry is the things that we're writing and posting about. We also have some original articles that we're putting in, and Tom has done a great job with a couple article series that have been put out. And we have also the documents and resources. And I think that's what you see here. The resources, this is one of our big things, is we have hundreds of documents that we are putting on the platform for people to do more research into it, whether it's white papers or thesis papers that have been put up by people that we've gotten permission to display, so that education doesn't stay within its stovepipe. Everybody can learn from each other. It's a collaborative environment right now with this evolving threat.
No, I think it's great. And fun fact, everybody, I'm co-authoring a white paper on remote ID, which we're going to talk about here shortly with Tom. So keep your eyes peeled for that, coming to a social media and CUS hub near you. So what can we expect in the future from Counter UAS Hub? Because I want to pivot and start talking about Aerovigilance.
So the future of COAS Hub, we're looking to just continue providing value for the industry, right? I mean, that's one of the primary reasons why I left federal government, is to provide more value to an industry that I think has a serious potential to be a crucial part of our national security as well as our public safety. And so that's going to include, we may be launching our very own podcast, not to compete with you, Dawn, but we may be looking at that. And we're also going to be doing some webinars that are specific for the technologies, for mission sets. And we're looking at, some training that we may be able to offer through COAS Hub.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to all of that. And honestly, I don't really consider anybody else out there that's informing the industry or the public to be my competitors. Honestly, we all need to be doing this together. And I have a lot of colleagues out there that have their own podcasts, some of which I'm on. So maybe we can do a pod swap at some point. But anyway, let's talk about Aerovigilance. So everybody out there, just to be clear, the Counter UAS Hub, let's just call it a brand. It's a thought leadership platform that falls under this company, Aerovigilance LLC, that these two co-created. It's very similar to what I have with P3 Tech and my Dawn of Drones and Law Tech Connect and Full Crew. I've got a number of brands, but people get confused. But P3 Tech is my company, and then all those others are kind of all my lines of effort, just as Aerovigilance is yours. So tell us a little bit about Aerovigilance.
So Aerovigilance, our goal with Aerovigilance was to take our unique homeland security knowledge and experience and apply it to the private sector as well as public safety, law enforcement. And our goal is to really, accelerate the development of counter UAS programs that people are going to start to develop to counter the threat of drones, the nefarious use of drones to whether it's our critical infrastructure, mass gatherings, et cetera. I will tell you, it's been a interesting transition going from the FBI to now kind of, trying to build a business. That one of the hardest things was trying to get a name. That was probably one of the most difficult things. It took us months to try to find a name. But really what we're trying to do is we provide program development, training, and then consulting services. And consulting is kind of let me start with program development. So program development, we believe in the use of technology in this space, but we think you need to build a baseline first of, program policies, procedures, training, and understanding of airspace awareness, the rules of the road, the rules of the air, so to speak, the strengths and limitations of technologies, and how you do this mission appropriately. But when it comes to the consulting side, it's kind of a catch-all. It could be for operations support. It could be for product or service development. It could be for site surveys, a variety of different things. So we provide a variety, really a mix of services for both the end users as well as the counter UAS product and service suppliers.
All right, very good. I know you both are super busy, just given your background, and part of this company, you've created an interesting collaboration with Skyfire Consulting. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Skyfire Consulting is doing a lot of great work in the public safety UAS and consulting and training space. So one of the reasons why we partnered with them, we have a little bit of history with them. One of their employees used to work with us, but they're a great company all around. And one of the primary efforts is drone first responder. So that's using drones as a first responder and helping with situational awareness, delivery of tools, whatever that case may be for that drone first responder program. And this is where counter UAS that we talked about is a bit of a misnomer. It's the technologies for counter UAS are for airspace awareness and not just countering drones. So that airspace awareness applies to your BVLOS as well as those DFR programs. So the radars you're using, the cameras, the RF sensors can all give you better situational awareness of where your drone is that you're using for public safety purposes. And that's part of our partnership, is kind of helping foster that message and help build out those programs.
That's great. It just makes such an abundant amount of sense that you're speaking in this month too, because Matrix Space is reimagining radar. So I'm sure you'll be working with them as well. But let's talk about the training aspect, though. You mentioned it, But why do you think training is so key to protecting our national airspace?
So training, it's a very general term, but it really includes quite a bit. A lot of people might focus on just the counter UAS or airspace awareness and protection options, but I think we're going to have to evolve a lot of our concepts of training. For example, in public safety and law enforcement, your state and local police officers who protect our communities, they are very well of all the different rules related to traffic laws and regulations and things like that. But now we're going to have to really start to understand the airspace rules and regulations, so that they can kind of understand when something might be out of the norm or breaking some sort of a rule, so to speak. But having that knowledge will also help them, entities to be able better to, basically, take care of their airspace awareness and protection program to be able to, conduct their operations effectively. So that's one part of it. The other part of the training part is training our drone pilots, whether they are the commercial Part 107 operators or your FAA recreational people. A lot of people will talk about the term careless and clueless.
And criminal, let's not forget about criminal.
And criminal, yeah.
And honestly, it's been happening in warfare for a long time, but I added the fourth C, honestly, now that we're seeing what we're seeing in an unprecedented level in the Ukraine and Russia, combatant. It's just a whole new level that we're seeing in that war, that's going to have profound homeland security implications that we'll be talking about here in a minute, with the events that you both will be speaking in upcoming. But anyway, also, by the way, I know I'm interrupting you, Tom. I also want to give a shout out to Olga. Olga is out there. She is a super fan. Not only does she come to almost every clubhouse we do, she also comes regularly into this podcast to say hello. So thank you so much again, Olga, for listening, and everybody else that's out there. So go ahead, Tom. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point, bringing up what's going on overseas in those areas. Those types of things, it's important for us to pay attention to those, because the technology, the tactics and techniques, they do not know borders. And so, if you don't think that those types of things going on overseas are going to impact things in the United States, I think you're going to be sadly mistaken. We really need to pay attention to what's going on, and we need to start. I think we accept too much risk right now in the security of our homeland. I think we need to start moving the ball forward a little bit, and I'm sure we'll probably chat about that a little bit later on. But going back into the training piece, out there's a lot of people flying drones that are not aware of that there are any rules of the airspace. They have no idea about, the altitude restrictions or, all those types of things. And so I think educating both our commercial and non-commercial drone pilots is going to be really important, especially as we begin to integrate more drones into the airspace. We're going to have a very busy NAS, and we need to kind of take this holistic approach. Law enforcement, all the different types of drone operators that may be out there. That's part of it too. And then we haven't even gotten into the security side of things as to how you properly train people to be able to protect the airspace. There are a lot of rules, regulations, federal laws that dictate what you can and can't do. And there's, some tactics and techniques that work better than others. And so it's very nuanced. I think Casey's, hopefully I didn't steal your thunder for something else, but he's talked about how the drone industry is very nuanced. And even within that, the counter UAS slice of it is even more nuanced. And so, training is going to play a huge role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you two are on board to help us all with that. By the way, the chat is coming to life. So thank you, everybody. Keep it coming. We've got Ralph Gonzalez out there saying, hey, Jen.
Hey, Ralph.
Hey, Ralph.
Looks like Ralph is a colleague of you two.
Yeah, we've known Ralph a while. He's great.
Awesome. Well, speaking of rules, it's really a great segue to talk about counter UAS authorities, or the lack thereof, quite frankly. We've seen some movement in the last year. And in fact, a second fun fact of the episode, wrote an op-ed that just appeared in Newsweek about a week or two ago. You can find that on the Counter UAS Hub, by the way, in addition to my website. So go ahead and check that out. But Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing from an authority standpoint.
Yeah, so a lot of the audience may already know that there's a lot of limitations out there right now with what you can do related to drone detection and mitigation. Right now, the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, and Department of Defense all have special authorities that they can use to protect critical assets from the credible threat of a drone that's deemed to be a credible threat to that asset, infrastructure, whatever the case may be. It's really complicated for some reason. I hope that someday it becomes a little bit less complicated. One of the challenging things is that drones are technically considered aircraft by legal statute out there, and so federal laws that protect aircraft, like the Aircraft Sabotage Act, Aircraft Piracy Act, come into play because drones, some drones, not all drones, are controlled via wireless communication between the ground control station and the drone. The use of certain technologies to decode or pull information off that radio frequency signal might break federal statute. GPS signals from a satellite down to a drone, interrupting those signals breaks federal law. And then, interfering with communications and such. There's a lot of different federal laws that are out there. And then, of course, you've got privacy and civil liberty concerns of, for example, a drone being flown by someone in the media, if they're in uncontrolled airspace. How do we make sure that we protect our First Amendment rights, or to ensure that the technology isn't going beyond, just the telemetry between the aircraft and the ground control station, to make sure that we're not violating people's Fourth Amendment rights. So it ends up getting fairly complicated, and which is why I think it's moving not as quickly as we'd like. Last year, the Biden administration put out the National Action Plan for Counter-UAS, which had some great logical steps to increase authorities to state and local entities, as well as critical infrastructure, to be able to have some advanced detection capabilities. And then just start to talk about moving that ball forward with being able to mitigate drones that are deemed to be a credible threat by having a pilot program to start introducing that technology in the state and local levels. And as of right now, we aren't really seeing a lot of movement. There was a different legislation authored and presented last year that didn't really get very far. The only thing that happened is that the authorities for DOJ and DHS were pushed to September 30th. And I'm not really sure what is on board for these next few months to see what would happen. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, we really need to start taking some meaningful steps forward. Casey mentioned earlier that when we were starting to perform this mission with our authorities, we didn't have a book to go off of. So we had to be very thoughtful about what we did and how we did it. And there's ways to learn some valuable lessons without increasing the risk to public safety or critical infrastructure. So let's start learning some of those lessons, and let's start taking some steps to secure our critical infrastructure, our mass gatherings, and our assets that are important to our country.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this picture of Casey. Fun fact number 3, if you're keeping track, this was featured in Inside Unmanned Systems magazine in an article I authored on the clueless, careless criminal combatant drone users. So check that out. But this is you in action, right, Casey? Like setting up a system.
That's correct. And this is, as you can see, it's quite the picturesque view of the downtown area. And one thing I want to talk about this, because this is kind of related to those practical tips and lessons learned from our operations. We can't talk about specifics, but we do want to get the message across that, number one, safety is paramount. This building in particular had a really nice parapet and structure around it that you're not going to fall off. But Tom and I have been on buildings 14 stories up where at night you could walk right off the edge. And
oh my gosh.
It is incredibly important. Yeah, it is incredibly important that you do, whether it's a crew resource management strategy, you have a safety officer, like safety for your personal safety is absolutely important. And then also the safety for the public. I mean, you're there doing a protection mission. So you have to understand the actions that you take could impact the safety of the public in that's not just using mitigation technologies. If you happen to see a drone pilot or a drone and you track it back to the pilot and that guy's wearing FPV goggles, don't rip those FPV goggles off, because then he loses all awareness of where his drone is. And so it's very nuanced in how we approach this mission. You have to be judicious and you have to be careful.
Yeah. Plus, Casey, that goggle ripping example actually would violate the Aircraft Sabotage Act technically, because you're messing with the crew, just like Tom said. So two quick things. Number one, just to foot stomp this, only a handful of federal agencies have affirmative counter UAS authorities, and I'm not just talking to mitigate or do something about the threat once you find it, but also just merely to detect it. That's a little bit controversial, but that is the position of the Department of Justice and the federal government at this time, which is why it's so critical that these authorities, now I'm pleading the Congress, if you're watching out there, you got to make something happen, guys and gals, because we need our skies protected, and at a minimum our feds. But I'll tell you what, boots on the ground, the first ones to the scene is going to be our brothers and sisters in blue. And if they're not trained properly, as Tom said, if they don't have the authority to do something about it, what are they going to do? Just stand by and watch something catastrophic happen? Because, if I take action, they can ask forgiveness later and maybe they'll get it. But why should they have to put their necks on the line and say, oh, maybe I'm violating the Aircraft Sabotage Act, the federal statute? So, again, these are things that need to be resolved in a big way. And Casey, if we have time, I want to get to more tips and lessons learned. But what I don't want to do is because time is flying, we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we talk about remote ID, because when you think about airspace awareness and protection, you think about public safety and the safety of members of the public. This is going to be really key, and it's becoming effective this September for drone pilots in the United States, drone operators. So I want to pivot to that and talk a little bit about what remote ID is and what it isn't, because I think there is a significant misunderstanding as to when you get a remote ID message elements, right? When you're able to actually have the tech to see, those different things that are supposed to be beamed out by broadcast message, what that indicates and what it doesn't. So maybe that's over to you, Tom.
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of remote ID. I think it's going to be very important as we continue to integrate drones into the national airspace, and I hope that it will play a very pivotal role in that. I think from a security perspective, we need to understand what those remote ID broadcast elements are and what they are not. I think one thing to note real quick is based on my interpretation of the remote ID rule is that not all drones are going to be required to broadcast remote ID. So if someone is using a drone that weighs less than 250 grams and it's just for recreational purposes, that drone does not have to broadcast remote ID.
That's correct.
And then for those drones that are required to broadcast remote ID, that remote ID signal, it could be impacted by RF interference. It could be impacted by buildings, terrain, vegetation, the altitude of the drones, those types of things. And then the reception of that remote ID signal, it could also be impacted by RF interference, or it could be impacted by the sensor density. We don't really know or understand like the broadcast range of these remote ID broadcasts. And so what range or what density of sensors are we going to need in order to really fully have a good idea of what drones are broadcasting remote ID? So, and the other thing is, I hope this doesn't happen, but we've already seen it with other drone makes and models, is spoofing a remote ID broadcast signal. Is that stuff going to happen? Are people going to start to do some hacks in some of those drones that are broadcasting remote ID, either that have been manufactured with that in, or that's retrofitted on the other end? So I'm saying all that, but what does all this mean? So a drone could be broadcasting remote ID, but you might not be receiving that. Also, a drone that is broadcasting remote ID could be up to nefarious activities. So the fact that it's compliant with remote ID rule doesn't mean that it's doing compliant or non-nefarious types of activities. So one of the big things I want to emphasize is remote ID can't tell you if it is or it is not a threat. That's just something we all need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just a data point. that we have to consider when we're doing these security operations. We still have to rely on our advanced detection capabilities that I'd mentioned earlier, and which is why it's so important for us to have expanded detection authorities for critical infrastructure, for public safety, law enforcement. We can't rely on remote ID to tell us whether something is or isn't a threat. It's just not possible. So I think that's something that's important for people to understand.
Yeah, look, as a former military member, that term layered defense is meaningful, not just in a combat or military context, but certainly in homeland defense and public safety operations as well. And, to use the lawyer term, it depends, right? Like it depends on the circumstance, what kind of technology that you need in any given scenario. So I think those are really important points. And Tom, your point about remote ID is not the be all and end all. It's important. It's one data point, is really critical for people to walk away from this show understanding, because I feel like there's been kind of almost like, urban legend floating around that like, hey, if they're not squawking, it must be a bad guy. Take them out. This is going to make it easy. Well, no, honestly, it's not. So don't be taking things out just because they're not squawking. That would be not an optimal place for all of us to be. So check out our white paper. It's coming again soon, I hope. But in our couple minutes, I want to do two things. Actually, three things. I want to hit super quick, like a lightning round, if you guys can do it fast. Top 3 lessons, counter UAS lessons that you learned through your missions. Just 3 quick bullet points. And then I want to talk top 3 practical tips. So let's talk lessons learned. 1, 2, 3, go.
Tom?
Oh, I thought you were going.
No pressure, no pressure.
I think for me, top 3 lessons learned, become knowledgeable about drones. I think that's so important. You have to have a good foundation. Be a lifelong learner is an important thing too, because this security mission is going to continue to evolve. And the other thing too is to realize that no one person has a comprehensive knowledge of all aspects of this mission. We're all continually learning. And so that's just something that I would say right offhand.
No, that's awesome. All right. So then Casey, over to you. You started giving us some
First, 'cause
practical
those are
tips like don't walk off the top of a roof at night. What are your three best practical tips for counter UAS operators?
Tom took all my good ones, so I will echo some of his. I mean, this threat is evolving as well as the technology is evolving. So not just becoming a drone operator, but making sure that you understand how drones are being used, staying up with potential advancements in UTM, just being that lifelong learner is super important to understand more about where you're operating, and do it judiciously. Take care in the mission, because I think sometimes people forget that this is national security and public safety. That's what this mission will eventually, what it encompasses now and will grow into. And the last thing is just collaborate with others. People have great experiences in this space, so don't discount them because they come from a very niche part of this. They have lessons.
Like as you guys were talking, I was thinking, IT people, cybersecurity people, guess what, everybody, they're part of this community because drones are flying computers essentially. So, I don't know that those people look at themselves like they're part of this community. And that's, I think, breaking through with that education and training you talked about, Tom and Casey, to kind of getting that word out. One more tip, and then I want to get to where some of the things you have coming up.
And so that collaboration piece is big, because I'm actually, my background is in general security technologies and communications. So doing radio communications, understanding wireless spectrum, and understanding how that applies to security procedures is kind of paramount.
Yeah, well, great segue. Speaking of lifelong learning and education, if you're not signed up for our Law Tech Connect workshop coming up at AUVSI Exponential on Monday, May 8th, you should be signing up. Certainly if you're going to Exponential, it's on the day before the main show kicks off. And Tom is going to be on one of those panels. So if we could roll that slide real quick, securing critical assets against the careless, Clueless and Criminal. And when you look at this lineup, I mean, all-star besides Tom, we've got DHS, we've got Jonathan Ruprecht, a renowned attorney, Dave Krause, who's the FAA's industry drone pro, and Lori DeMatteis from Matrix Space, our month sponsor, and Radars Reimagined. So I can't even think of a better panel for this topic. And then also in June, we're going to have our energy edition. Tom's going to appear there. We've got a little bit of a different lineup. We've got Jennifer Richter from Aiken Gump talk about Spectrum. She is the U.S. expert, an attorney on that. Ravi from SAIC, Tyler from Crowell Mooring, and Trent from CSG. He's a cybersecurity guy, by the way, Trent, Rising Sky. So that's going to be in Houston with the Energy Drone folks. So sign up for that one too. If you're in Houston, you're planning to go to that event, that's going to be on Monday, June 12th. So 2 minutes left. I want to give you each, 30 seconds to kind of do your summarization, what you want to leave people with. But also please include as part of that, how they can reach you, how they can plug into the Counter UAS Hub and some of your efforts other than coming to our Law Tech Connect workshops and seeing you in person. So let's go ahead and start with Casey. You first to give us the wrap up, and then over to Tom to close us out.
So I think we've covered that. Drones are super complicated, and counter drone is even more complicated, as Tom briefed us with his laws and legislation piece. So don't be afraid to ask questions, collaborate with others, seek out more learning opportunities, and please sign up for our newsletter on CUAS Hub, as well as become a member. Start interacting with the community if you want to learn more. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have contact forms on CUAS Hub as well as on Aerovigilance.
Awesome. Very good. Tom.
Yeah, so kind of similar to what we already chatted about a little bit. This is a very nuanced industry. So the more it's good to be a Swiss Army knife, learn a lot of different things so that you can have a broader perspective and collaborate with others, as Casey said. We're easy to get in touch with through our Aerovigilance website or cuashub.com or tom@aerovigilance.com or casey@aerovigilance.com. And that's it for me.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you both so much. I told you before we started, this time was going to fly, and it did. We did not get to cover nearly half of, we could have an entire show, probably several just on the counter drone authorities. So maybe an upcoming webinar, gents. But in the meantime, everybody, thank you so much for dialing in. We appreciate you. And that's all she wrote. We are out here.